Hi, my name is Hananya.
Hello there, my name is Shameem.
And my name is Leslie. We're three international friends on a mission to write and publish our first novels. We are the three writing amigas. Yay! We're all together. Oh my God. I had my computer up and I was like testing stuff, but then I got sidetracked texting somebody.
Okay.
And Shameem pops up and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, it's time. It's freaking out.
Yeah.
Couldn't get my earphones in. You know, it's a Leslie morning.
I mean, fair enough.
Yeah, there you go. So we thought, since everyone's been kind of following us, our journeys of figuring out what the heck our books are about and characters and all that stuff, that it might be fun to read little sneak peeks, you know, from portions of our books, so people can kind of get even a better idea of what our stories are about. So who wants to be the guinea pig this time and read theirs first?
I think we agreed I was going to go first.
Oh, we did. Oh, I forgot.
Yeah, because then Shameem could be in the middle.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Because, you know, I don't, you know, my brain. Okay.
I thought you watched back our episode from last week.
You watched the whole thing.
Yeah, you think you'd be fresher in Leslie's mind than ours.
Right. Yeah.
And as well, you're the director. You're the one that
you would think.
us.
Yeah, you would think, okay.
It's probably somewhere on like a scribbly note that is on her desk somewhere.
Oh my. The things that, you know, this is how my life goes. I don't know if you can see any of that, but it's like, it looks like
scribble.
Football diagrams. Okay.
Yeah.
So, without further ado.
Yes. I'm going to read it off of my phone because that's going to be easiest.
Okay. However you like to do it.
Okay. Gonna sit well for this. Okay. Before long, my father showed up, as predicted by Will. He walked in with two of his guards following in his wake. I was still in Stormy's stall on the other side of the stable from where my father stood now. Will greeted him, bowed down slightly, and held out the reins to a tall, dark horse. Thank you, Will. My father took the reins and led his horse closer to Stormy's stall on his way out. I stroked Stormy to keep her calm, but at the sight of my father, she kneed and drew attention to the both of us. I sighed and looked up straight into my father's disapproving eyes. Seeing no guard around you, I'm assuming you've snuck off again. My father turned to his guard. Why was I not informed her guard had lost sight of her? Did either of you know? Both of them shook their heads. I could see the anger rise in my father's eyes. He handed the reins to one of his guards and stepped closer to the gate of Stormy's stall. You, he pointed at me. You will go back to your room at once. Carlos will escort you back. I looked down and waited for the real punishment to come. You will stay in your room for the remainder of your day. There it was. I looked back up at him. The anger did not flatter his face. Father, you cannot keep me locked up in my room all day. I tried to keep calm, but I was not ready to be trapped even more than I already felt I was. With the only freedom I had was roaming the palace grounds with a guard by my side at all times. I can and I will, my father stated simply and firm. Father, I did not leave. Okay, hold on. Father, I did not even leave the premises. I'm right here with my horse. What's the harm in that? What could have honestly happened to me here? I felt frustrated with him. He never thought about what it might be like for me. I do not feel compassion for you at this moment, Amelia, nor do I care about what you have to say for yourself. This behavior has gone on for far too long, and I am tired of you disobeying and undermining my wishes. He hit the gate between us. Stormy jumped, and I tried to calm her down. Your wishes? I asked, raising my voice. Your wishes? Have you ever even thought about what I might want, or even listened to what my wishes are? I would assume that if you really had your way, I would have never even been born. I saw Will approach us, slowly moving closer. He held his hand up and shook his head, urging me to stop, but I ignored him. That would be the best scenario for you, wouldn't it? If I'm dead, wouldn't that make your life that much easier? Fulfill your wish of me no longer being your problem? That's how you see me, isn't it? As your problem? Tears slowly rolled down my cheeks. I pushed the gate open and walked to Carlos. Are you coming or not? I asked him as I kept walking. I looked over my shoulder and could see the different expressions on the faces behind me. Will looked at me with the sadness and sympathy. The guards both stared at me with shock and confusion about what had just happened. My father was a completely different story. He stood there flabbergasted, shocked, but at the same time, angry as his hands had formed fists at his sides of his body. His face almost had a hint of sadness over it as he looked down. He had not come back with a response, but simply nodded towards Carlos to escort me back to my room. Servants ducked left and right in the halls when I stormed past. I stomped up the stairs back to my room. Carlos instructed one of the guards to find the guard assigned to me. I had at that moment been reminded that his name was Christian. I had given up on remembering their names. It seemed I was assigned a new one every fortnight. Carlos opened the door to my room for me when we got there. He had an apologetic look on his face as he closed it behind me. He waited for Christian and instructed him to not let me out or anyone in to visit me. Unsure of what to do with my day, I went to the balcony and leaned on the stone balustrade. I sighed and looked out to the kingdom, to the land that my father called his kingdom. That's it.
I had to unmute.
Yeah, me too. Because I didn't want to. I trying to keep my mouth obviously.
Right, moving around. Wow, you
saying
really get a
anything as well.
sense of her, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
she's pretty ballsy. I mean, well, is she ballsy or bratty? That's what I kind of wondered.
A little bit bratty, I would say.
Yeah.
A little bit,
I think
yeah.
that comes through.
Yeah.
And the kind of bratty that you can only have when you're of the privileged class, probably. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, basically, she has a really good life. She's just not happy with it.
Yeah. And understandably, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, she's got a brain, clearly.
Mhm.
She's not, you know, inarticulate or anything like that. And it's hard. I mean, I can't even imagine women back then that, you know, that did have brains and not allowed to have aspirations, not, you know, being chattel. But that frustration, I think, really comes through, you know, in this excerpt that you read. You know, and she's young too, right? So she's also, you know, a rebellious teen.
Yeah, she's 17, turning 18. So
yeah. So, you know, you really get that. But her father feels really cold. Is that how you wanted to? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that comes through.
That's kind of how I wanted him to be. Kind of very much so like king-like and like duty above everything else. And like kind of like that. So he's not as loving towards his family.
Yeah. Because he rules them too.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
In a way he does, because he sees it as the kingdom and the duty to the kingdom to like serve the kingdom, and like family comes second. Or like not at all. It's just like,
yeah.
Kingdom above all.
It reminded me of a conversation I had with a woman from Saudi Arabia, and she was quite well off, had, you know, rich family, good life, good surroundings, lovely environment, and she called her life, you know, like living in a beautiful prison, basically.
Like a gilded cage,
a prison with no bars. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because it's still a prison, because there's you can't leave, there's rules. And and that conversation was only not long ago. So
really,
that's
so interesting.
So,
I see that completely.
That's what it reminded me of, like lots of privilege, weirdly lots of privilege, but still lots of restraints as
and feeling trapped in a way, right?
Clearly, I mean, like she said, you know, I'm just down here at the stables, like, you know, I'm not outside of the grounds or whatever, the perimeter that you've allowed me, but because I'm not under your eye, you know, you're out here fighting, you know, what am I doing? You know?
Because someone's not with me watching every second,
right?
You get upset. So
I mean, that's a level of control. Talk about Shameem's guy. That's right, you know.
Well, I always say that there's worse things you can do to a person than hit them. You can hurt. I personally think, you know, you can hurt somebody more with how you make them feel and just, the words that you speak more than, when you hit somebody, as much as it's awful, I'm not saying it's not awful, but
of course,
it's kind of like, one and done, and then it stops. Whereas mental and, that kind of thing just goes on and on and on and on, because it lives in your head, isn't it, as well?
Right.
So does the physical.
It's harder to turn around as well. Like, it's harder to unlearn certain feelings.
Absolutely.
Than to heal from a physical wound. Like, it's easier to heal a physical wound sometimes than heal like
a psychological one.
Yeah.
Well, because you can see it healing as well, and you can't. There's no visual representation,
and the pain eventually goes away for the most part. I mean, unless it's a really terrible thing. I made a film many years ago called Words That Wound. And it was really impactful. I mean, and what we did, and this is the thing about psychological wounds that I learned in the piece, we never said the words. We led you up to a place where, because we all know, like, it's something easy would be, maybe say a Black person would be easy. We all know the N word. We wouldn't say it, but we would bring you up in a story to a point and then pause, and you would hear it in your head. And that's how psychological damage happens. That's so different, right? Because that's why it lasts so much longer. It gets in there, and you can't get it out. So whereas a broken arm, or, I mean, that's horrible. But eventually that pain goes away.
Will heal,
and so it allows you potentially some relief to not have to think about it or remember it, be reminded by it. Whereas the psychological stuff is really in there. So I think you really nailed that feeling of being trapped, and then having your captor, meaning her father, the king, just being completely aware of it, but saying that's the deal, that's rough, that's good.
I bet that your character Shameem feels trapped probably as well, without realizing it, maybe.
I just need to give it like a heads up that when I'm nervous, I speak really fast, faster than I do usually, and I get Welsher, so my accent would
get Welsher.
My narrator, my story is Welsh, so just in case there's some weird shit going on, that you know why.
You are so funny. I mean, it's hard. It's nervous making to read aloud, even when you're with friends. I don't know why that is. Like, suddenly I forget how to read, and I'll change the words. The words will change. They won't be what's on the. I don't know why that is.
Okay, then.
You ready for your
Do you want to do a quick disclaimer? I don't know how graphic's going to be, but
it's not. It's well, it is a little, but not. I picked a tamish section.
Just wanted to point it out in case you did want to put a disclaimer.
That's a good point, actually. It's nothing. There's a teeny bit, but I think I'm desensitized because this is what I'm writing. I don't know.
Right. Okay. Well, just in case, if this is a sensitive subject, we've talked about Shameem's story, but in the past, it is about physical abuse. So if that's difficult for you, you might want to hot it down, but she has found a passage that's not too disturbing. And I'm going to mute now.
Okay. Right then. Whenever she told Will that she was going back home or arranging to see Mel, he always got a bit grumpy. He didn't like her not being around. I just miss you too much, he said, as he squeezed her hand tightly. I love you. I can't get enough of you, and I don't like sharing you with anyone else. He squeezed her hand again, but this time just a little bit too hard. She looked down at their hands, then back at him. I feel the same about you. I just don't like disappointing them. Tana thought that Will wanting to be with her all the time demonstrated just how much he loved her. I do need to see them, Will. My family and Mel are always there for me, and I need to be there for them, now and again at least. That's all I'm asking. Will sulked and pulled a pouty face. What about being there for me then? Tana kissed him on his nose. We see each other all the time, man. This conversation topic kept coming up, and Will was relentless. It quickly evolved from him being charming and sweet to being a clear sore subject, a constant source of anxiety and the cause of major upsets. The first time Will revealed his true self was when they were on their way back from a night out in Swansea. They were sitting in the back seat of a taxi and snuggling up. Tana felt tense. There never seemed to be a good time to bring up the subject. She steadied her nerves. She wanted to say it as quickly as she could before she changed her mind again. I'm thinking of staying at my mother's this weekend, Will. Melissa is really down in the dumps because she's getting loads of grief from her mother, and it looks like she's going to have to move to Cardiff with her. Tana took a deep breath. She felt Will recoil and pull back as he unwrapped his arms from around her. He shoved her away from him and sat up straight, looking directly out of the front windscreen. Tana reached out and tried putting her arms back around him, and he swatted them away as if she was a buzzing fly. Come on, Will, she coaxed. I haven't spent hardly any time back home for weeks now. Out of nowhere, she felt a sharp sting on her cheek, and she winced. She was horrified and embarrassed. She put her hand up onto her face to touch the source of pain. You bloody slapped me. He just ignored her. She looked at him in shocked disbelief as the realization of what had just happened sank in. She turned towards the taxi driver, who seemed oblivious of their presence, and then back at Will. Am I going mad, she thought. What the actual fuck, Will? She implored loudly. Will just sat there and continued to ignore her. If it weren't for her cheek, letting her know that she had just been slapped, she would have thought she'd imagined it all. Even more mind-boggling was the taxi driver. No reaction, not even looking back to see what was happening. The rest of the journey continued in silence until they pulled up outside Will's place. Will got out, slamming the car door behind him. Tana just sat there, rooted to the seat, not wanting to move. Will paid the taxi driver, then moved to the other side of the car where Tana sat and opened the door. Get out of the car, Tana, he barked. No fucking way, she retorted. She faced the driver and pleaded, can you take me to the station, please? She reached to pull the door shut. Will yanked the door back. She fell forward across the seat. The taxi driver looked out of his front window. He took no notice of Tana. He said nothing. He did nothing. He was just waiting for his passenger to get out of his car. Will lunged towards her, grabbing her by her hair, and he dragged her out of the taxi. She landed clumsily, hitting the curbside with both knees, and screamed. Will seemed oblivious to her distress and stepped over her to close the taxi door. She watched on from the ground in disbelief as the taxi driver drove off. She felt a dull thud smack her head and knew Will had punched her. Adrenaline coursed through her, protecting her from feeling more pain in that moment. She curled up in a ball, instinctively covering her face with her arms in anticipation of whatever was coming next. Surely someone can see or hear what he's doing to me, she thought frantically. She lay there in a panic and held her breath for what felt like an eternity. She kept her eyes tightly shut. She didn't say another word, and she remained silent. Her heart sunk with misery at the realization that no one was coming.
Wow.
Wow. That's what I want to say. Is
I don't know why I'm smiling. I keep smiling, and it's not happy shit.
Because it's so impactful.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Seriously. You know?
That taxi driver pisses me off
Right?
so much.
Me too. Oh my God, Hananya. So much. I felt the same way. I was mad.
Like I could see you
mad.
shaking your head the whole time. You were like, oh my God.
I'm like, you want to just drag that taxi driver out and punch him.
Right?
Right?
I was like
this woman is being assaulted.
And you're just like, meh.
You know, waiting for your
what?
fare.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Let me just say something. I remember back when we were first talking about, I guess, Will.
Yeah.
And you brought up this thing about, you know, some other books you had written that were sort of about, you know, domestic abuse and whatever, and that they didn't quite go someplace. And then I said, what is it? And you said, you didn't feel the fear.
Yeah.
And so this is the first time I've heard any of your writing.
I know. That's why I was
same.
so scared. That's why I didn't share it with you before, because I was just like,
I felt the fear.
Yeah.
That's really good then.
I mean, yeah. And especially because you're writing third person. So, I mean, you kind of expect...
It still feels like you're in Tana's shoes, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was worried about that, especially because I read your bloody blog before we came on. And I was thinking, point of view.
Oh, thank you for reading that.
I commented as well. So
thank you. But yeah, you know, I mean, I really felt it And I think it's hard. We talk, not to just talk about my blog, but to talk about, because I went through that with the third person and then went to first, third person limited, meaning that it's still kind of Tana's point of view, but it's out here. You still feel a certain intimacy with her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important, but I get why you needed to move away from the inside of her head. Because that, first of all,
yeah, it's way easier. It's way easier doing it this way than how I started, which is why I can still laugh and smile, I suppose.
So funny. But also, and then Will, who you captured in that little bit of him before he starts to hurt her, that manipulation, that, right? Because all she wants to do is see her family, and he pulls away. He denies her love.
Yeah.
He denies her affection,
But also the cold-heartedness of him, of just like, I just slapped you, but I'm going to pretend nothing happened.
That's right.
Like,
yeah.
I'm not even going to like acknowledge the fact that you're in this car with me. I'm just going to sit here and pretend you don't exist. Like, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so harsh.
That's what they do, though. They make you think you imagined it all, because the taxi driver is just carrying on. You just think
that was what put it over the top. I mean, Hananya and I were ready to go to Wales and find this dude.
Yes. I was like about to just reach out and be
yeah. I'm pleased. Because I was really like, shitting myself.
No, it makes you feel the feels, as in like you feel what Tana's feeling, but it also makes you angry at Will and at this freaking taxi driver. Like that makes me mad.
Yeah.
So mad.
I mean, and that is probably the most important and the most I don't know, I'm losing my vocabulary right now, but the most impactful thing that any of us can do as writers is to get the reader or the listener, let's say this was a audiobook, to feel what your character's feeling, or to feel
in general as well.
To feel in general. Right? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the goal. That's the goal for all, even when it's like funny, it doesn't matter what it is, but to have some kind of actual emotional reaction to the words, to your words, that's what it's all about. And you did it, man. Whew. But also I'm thinking, damn, she said she found like a milder passage. I'm going to have a defibrillator nearby when I read your book.
Right? I feel like I probably can't read your book all in one go. I feel like it's one of those ones where it's like, you need to take it in pieces.
Yeah.
Especially because Hananya and I wanted to actually leave our homes and go find the guy. So like half the time I'm gonna have to be like, oh my god. Close the book and like, let me punch something right now.
Yeah, there are a lot of lighthearted, even I hope funny moments.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is the opposite.
Right. And so you need the break. You need the break.
Yeah. So it's kind of
But also, I mean, it's human nature. No matter how bad our lives are, there are moments, right? Because we're human beings where we have fun or we see a butterfly or whatever. So that would be that would make sense too. But also, you're giving an old lady a heart attack over here.
Yeah. But human beings are good, aren't they? In terms of when something really bad is happening, when they rally together, somehow, I don't know, people make each other laugh or smile or
absolutely
someone says something stupid. Yeah.
It's our nature to not to find humor in places where you wouldn't think humor should be found, because you just can't live like that every day, right? You can't. It make you crazy. So okay, so my passage, of course,
less shocking, hopefully.
Far less shocking. I'm not reading the one that we agreed to.
Okay.
Leslie Farrell. What can I tell you?
Doing your own thing.
doing my own thing. It kept in my head, and all of a sudden I was like, no, and I want to read this instead. And hopefully, what are you going to do? Okay. So here we go. And I'm reading it off of my other computer screen. So we're hoping for the best.
Look at you.
Pardon me?
Look at you, not having it printed out. I'm impressed.
Yes, I'm glad you noticed that, because I almost did. And I thought, no, I can't, because
that's why I was like, okay, I'm impressed.
I know. I'm learning. See, I'm learning.
I copied mine onto a Word doc, and I moved it in front of the Zoom screen, so I couldn't see you. So it made it easy.
That's what you did. Oh, see, that's probably what I should have done, but I didn't. And so
that's why I just grabbed my phone. So
yeah. So I'm just going to be looking off to the side.
3 different ways of approaching things, which is exactly why we're here with the 3 of us.
That's right.
That's true. That is true.
Exactly.
Right.
That's
Go for it.
Okay. We'll mute ourselves.
Okay. Here I go. About halfway up the staircase, I could see our freshly painted 2-story farmhouse. My heart was racing something fierce, so I stopped to look for signs that Mama was home. Luckily, the coast was clear. Come on, Dot. I think we're going to make it before Mama. I hooked my arm tighter around hers, and we ran a 3-legged race up the rest of the way. We got up to the landing and made a beeline across the lawn, past the willow tree, headed for the porch steps. We were just a few feet away when out from around the corner stepped Mama. She was wearing her soiled and worn butchering apron. She held a hog's leg in her right hand, and a cleaving knife the size of a small flag dripping with blood in her left. Her eyes locked onto mine. Dot and I skidded to a stop. I could feel Mama's glare pierce me clean through. I think for a moment my heart might have actually stopped beating. I knew for sure I was dead, or about to be. Mama had big, green, angry eyes, the kind of eyes that made you shiver down to your bones when they focused on you. She gripped her cleaving knife, and the ham so tight her knuckles were just about turning white. I swallowed hard. How's she know? Whispered Dot without taking her eyes off Mama. I wondered that too, then I realized that someone must have called her. I knew it because Mama didn't seem the least bit surprised when she turned the corner and saw us. That and the way she smirked like she was calling us stupid inside her head. Somebody must have called her, I whispered low. I forced myself to stand tall as a fire grew in my belly. I think it must have reached my eyes because Mama took a step towards us, then stopped. I wished the front steps were closer and that Mama wasn't standing between us and them, but I willed myself not to flinch. We stood there holding each other's gaze. She didn't even blink. She just stared me down. I felt Dot's little body shaken through her tiny hand. I clenched it even tighter and dug my feet firmly into the grass. Mama should have known better than to try to outstare me, since I had won the informal stare-down championship last year at school. There was no way I was going to flinch, at least not if I had any chance of getting her to back down and for me to live. Then after the longest time, Mama finally said to me, "This is the 3rd time this week you've been sent home. They kick you out for good this time?" Wouldn't she love that? I held back a scream, and it wasn't easy. "I ain't kicked out," I said, getting mad at myself for my voice quivering. "This is just a temporary setback." Mama's eyes turned from angry to diabolical. I lifted my chin higher into the air to trick her into thinking I wasn't scared. I squeezed Dot's hand so tight she pulled away and left me standing alone. "It would be easier on you if they just expelled you," said Mama. My heart sank, but something inside me pushed me to keep going. "I don't want to miss school, Mama. It ain't time yet," I said. Then under my breath, "I love school. I love learning." "What you say?" challenged Mama. "Nothing." I tried a crooked smile. I ain't completely stupid. Talking back was a criminal offense in the Rose family household. I could tell I was about at the end of Mama's patience, with the next step being a whooping for sure if I kept going. Mama pointed at me with the bloody cleaver. "Now, I done told you before, Letty Joe, learning ain't going to help no colored girl make a good life for herself. But I considered myself a modern woman, and I knew there was more to life than what we had been allowed in the past. Still in all, I needed to get my school certificate and learn to type if I was going to make my new life possible. So I just had to stay in school, and I had to try to make Mama understand that." I softened my voice. Didn't want Mama to think I was challenging her none. You always telling me to raise my station in life, Mama. Get a good man. I could feel the blood rising in my cheeks. Mama took a step towards me. My stomach clenched something fierce, but I couldn't help myself and I kept on going. Well, getting myself educated is how I plan to raise my station in life, not from being no maid. I regretted those words as soon as they left my mouth, even though I believed them with the deepest part of my heart. Mama's grip on the cleaver tightened and she raised her arm just a bit, like she was thinking of chopping my head clean off. She narrowed her eyes at me as if she could have killed me with them. I think she might have. I started to speak again when Dot grabbed my hand. No, Letty, Dot whispered. Through her streaming tears, she said, Mama, we sorry. We really sorry. We won't fight again no matter what. We promise, don't we, Letty? She looked up at me, her eyes pleading with me to agree. I stood silent and weighed my options.
It's such, excuse me, a strong prose. It's because you just feel like you're in the 1930s. And you do, don't you? And you just feel like you're in that era, in the Depression. And Mama's fierce with her meat cleaver machete type. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good example of fear, without actually doing anything.
Right?
Yeah.
So totally different. I just realized all these three passages are about fear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
In a way.
Amelia is saying it how Amelia is saying it as it is, almost a little bit unfiltered for the time.
Yeah.
Whereas Letty is still fierce, but very, very filtered because she knows how far she can go.
Yeah. She pushes the line, but she wants to live. That's So it's fun. I'm glad. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. It just takes me right back to I watched a film at the weekend called The Race. It was about Jesse Owens.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's set in 1933.
Oh yes, that's right.
There you go.
Yeah. And I was thinking Letty's characters live up the road from here.
There you go.
There
you go. Yeah.
That's kind of how I would. And then as you were saying it was taking me back because the film is like visual. It was taking me back to that surrounding.
Yeah.
And and obviously, because I read it all, so I know. But it wasn't boring because I heard it before. It was like listening to an audible. Do you know what I mean? With the accent and stuff.
Yeah,
which I don't know where that comes from, by the way, huh?
3 different accents in
Did I?
stories. No, as in like yours is what would you call that? I don't know.
My normal accent?
No, your characters.
Well, it's kind of, I feel like that comes from my family's from Southern Illinois, from this area. And I think that's because it just comes naturally to me. Obviously, I don't really speak that way. I'm from California, but it must be it's how I heard them when I was a kid. So that voice was in me. And when I started writing this and knowing I was putting it in the same area, it's not in their town, but in the same area, that's the voice that just came out. I think because it was just already there, Yeah.
But I find that like super strong. I feel like it's so particular. And I love hearing it as you say it, because then it makes sense in my head. But reading on the page, I'm like trying to do that voice in my head and it just doesn't come naturally to me. So I think
doesn't?
for me, like
no. No, you're
Who
not
would have
wrong,
known?
because it's a vernacular. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's a vernacular. And although I tried to make it not too much, because I even have trouble when, some people like every word, like, and I've seen that especially with like either Cockney or certain parts of Liverpool, that area, like when writers, and they'll write all this vernacular, like, and then sometimes I have to sit there and sound it out loud to understand what it means. So I had to give some of that, but I tried to really not go overboard.
Yeah. But I did really like how like real it sounds. You know what I mean? Like it's very much so like particular to that kind of situation, I would feel. So I like that a lot. And I feel like listening to it as you say it, it makes so much sense. And I'm just like, this feels like a movie playing out right now in my head.
Yeah.
And I love that. Yeah.
Good. Hananya, I will just read to you once a week. No, just kidding.
Yes, please. Please record your book so I can like read it.
I probably will have the same problem because I have a lot of Welshisms in my book, a lot of slang, a lot of words that won't necessarily make sense to the modern reader or people that live outside of Wales, let's say.
Right.
So I've got a lot of that in there as well. And I found when I was reading your story, Leslie, in the beginning, it was like I was learning the lingo, and then it started to roll like a song kind of thing, and then you get into, it's almost like you get into the rhythm. But I have read a lot of books that have strong I didn't know what the word was until you just said it, the vernacular. Like I was saying about that book I read of Dougie Stewart, of Shuggy Bain, isn't it? Douglas Stewart, sorry, and strong Glaswegian accent. And in the beginning, I just couldn't understand it, and it was really like jarring me. But I didn't find yours jarring at all. I found it almost melodic, like it was melodical. It was like there's a melody in how she speaks and how she thinks. Sorry.
Good.
So you remember it. You remember it for ages. Yeah.
Thank you. That was fun. I loved hearing your story. All the stories. It's so cool, right?
It's the first time you've heard anything from my
because I have not been allowed to read the chapter.
You were allowed. I offered to send it to you.
I was afraid by then. Yeah. But I'd read your short story, but then that wasn't.
It's different.
That was very different. Yeah.
Yes.
So no, this was really fun because for all of us to hear everything. I really liked
and
that.
I hope that the listeners or viewers, if you're watching us, enjoyed kind of hearing a little bit more about the stories that we've talked about.
Yeah. Letty, Amelia, and Tana.
That's right. That's right. Right. This is a big deal.
The end.
Yes, the end.
Hello, Shameem here.
And Leslie. We wanted to take a moment to thank all of our listeners for following our journey to becoming published authors.
So now that we are deep into editing our books, we've turned our attention to the world of publishing. We've quickly learned that as hard as it is to get published, it's even harder if you're a writer from a non-mainstream community.
So Shameem and I are embarking upon a new journey. Coming this spring is our latest podcast, Always the Other, Conversations about Writing from the Margins. You can check out our episode 0 now. Welcome to Always the Other, Conversations about Writing from the Margins. I'm Leslie Farrell.
And I'm Shameem Smiley. Welcome to the conversation. Hello, and thanks for checking out our new podcast, Always the Other, Conversations about Writing from the Margins.
In this podcast, we'll talk with authors, journalists, documentarians, publishers, bloggers, and others to discuss the challenges and triumphs of being a non-mainstream storyteller. In other words, writers just like us.
Exactly. The publishing world is still pretty much vanilla, and so we face different challenges to get our stories out into the world. And we believe that talking about it, sharing our stories and experiences can only help all of us.
It's really true, though, right? Because I think about when we first met and, right? So we met on the workshop and we decided to meet offline and do our own little Zoom. And you started talking about you're from Wales and, mixed race and your dad. And I'm like, oh, my God, this is my story. How is my story your story? Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think. Honestly, I think about this a lot as to, because I am not sociable, as in like meeting strangers sociable. I'm definitely an introverted extrovert, I would say, because I can turn it on for work, but outside of that, I am very much an introvert, I think. But you reached out to me, if you remember, and you asked me about pictures.
Well, you had Prince posters.
And honestly, that is a sign. I'm telling you, anyone that's proactively message me because they've seen the pictures, I just know that it's going to be a good conversation. And everything you said, I just thought, oh my God, we're like sisters from another mother or something. Yeah.
Really. I mean, it's really amazing to me, but you know, it's also, it just to me is sort of proof of what we're talking about, which is that even though you're from 6,000, 9,000, whatever it is, some enormous amount of,
Oh, it's a long way away.
it's a long way away. I've forgotten how far it is. Anyway, but you're in Wales. I'm on the west coast of the United States. You know, that we have so many things in common, and not only in our families, but then like out in society, right? Because we are people of color and we're not quote unquote the mainstream, that we've had a lot of similar experiences of being, you know, treated as a second class citizen, or, you know, our stories not having the same value. And I think that's true about writing, you know, as well. So I just think that the sisterhood that we have developed because of where we came from, like you, and like even in your writing, you're a tech person, which, you know, believe me, you make fun of me, but that's okay. I do my best. But you know, it's like in your writing journey, when you started writing, what were the kinds of first things you were writing? Were you kind of aware of this difference that we had?
No, well, because we talked about this before. I started writing when I was really young,
Yeah.
and it was always on topics that other people chose for me, I think. I had a big, I don't know, not epiphany, but major moment in lockdown where I was experiencing, I don't know, it was like I was seeing and hearing and feeling everything from in a really magnified way. It just made me want to scream, and it made me it made me just want to say, you know, I need to embrace myself. I need to embrace the fact that I'm different. I've always, throughout my life, even from being really young, my differences have been weaponized against me.
Yeah.
So the fact that I'm so different has almost been used as always a negative. Not always, but the people that love me, the people that really take the time to get to know me, you know, don't believe that. But others, I don't know. If I piss somebody off, the first thing that will come out when I was a kid is my color. First thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's used as a weapon. And why? Why is because it's somehow, you know, that became the divider, right? Because
Yeah.
it's easy. It's on the outside. You can't hide that, you
No.
know.
It happened like when I was growing up because, and I know this is where we've got some slight differences. I grew up in a very white environment,
Yeah.
very white. You know, the only ones. No, it was me and a black kid in the class. When I joined the army very young, after leaving school, and I was the only one there. You know, I was always, and then when in the army, there weren't many women, and then I joined like, you know, the workforce when I left, and in tech, I was the only woman, and I was the only woman of color, person of color, really. It
Yeah.
was just majority white all the time. And I don't know, it just makes you feel more different. It makes you feel more, you know, in the other space, call
Yeah,
it.
no, absolutely. And it's, you know, it's a couple things. And you're right. We had very different upbringings that way because like my family was very, we had different ethnicities in my family. My town, I'm from Berkeley, California. So it's like, you know, if anybody knows that history and the hippies in the 60s and all that stuff, it's like I lived in a diverse family. I lived in a diverse neighborhood. I went to a diverse schools. But what that did for me is not prepare me for after high school, because that's just not like how the country is, right? So I grew up in this like really integrated environment. And that's not to say everything was like, you know, peachy keen and blah, 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 like as if we never experienced any racism. I don't mean that. But I mean that, you know, I was around a lot of different perspectives and things like that. So what I was used to in a family and in a town and all like that, when you're growing up around a lot of different people is, and I'm not saying like, again, I'm not saying there was never any racism, things like that. That's not true. There were, but we were surrounded by enough people that kind of took me as a person. And I think one of the biggest problems or issues or, you know, obstacles to overcome in our storytelling and publishing, you know, whatever, is that mainstream people tend to look at people who are non-mainstream, people on the margins, as like blocks. If you're Black, this is what you're like. If you're, whatever, if you're Asian American, you're like this, and blah, blah. And so they don't ever scratch the surface to find out that we are people, and that we have all these different stories and different experiences and things. And so, like, I was a documentarian for, I still consider myself one, but anyhow, for a good 30 years, I made all kinds of American history documentary films. And then I tried to get some of my own off the ground. I tried to get Black West off the ground 20 plus years ago. And I couldn't get money for it. Only thing I could get money for was Black people being slaves or Black people during Jim Crow. That was it. Like, that's the whole story of Black people in America. You know?
Yeah.
And that, I'm sorry.
No, similar, but different. I think that's the common thread, I think, for me and you, I mean.
But, but that's the deal. It's like, we're people. And we have stories, and we have backgrounds, and we have histories, and we have fantasies, and we have imagination, and it's like, if you don't fit the mold of what makes a certain group comfortable, somehow, that they discount it or don't want to hear it or whatever. Like, for me, it's like, Black folks, our story is more than, it includes, but it is more than slavery and Jim Crow,
And it's more, and I mean, there's more to it than just the color of your skin, isn't it? Because, you can have Black assholes, brown assholes, Black brilliant people. It's just the same in terms of good, bad, and evil, and all of those elements. But I think sometimes people look at us, they make a judgment on, how we are, who we are, how we think, or are often surprised, you have to justify where you're from. Because I think my family confuses people, because my sister's Black, my mother's like white, my brother's a bit darker than me, so we're a bit of a rainbow family. And I think it's confusing, and people just want to know. So that I meet somebody and they'll say, "Where are you from?" And I'll say, "Wales." And then they'll say, "Where are you really from?" And I'll say, "I'm really from Wales." Or they'll say, "Oh, your name's a bit strange." And I'm like, "It's not strange to me," kind of thing. And then they'll say, "Can I call you something for short? Because, I can't say your name." And I'm like, no. If I started calling you Dick, then you'd have an issue. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, why is it okay? Because I have a non-typical name to shorten it. So it's just weird stuff like that, I think. And that's from like being really young and having a non-standard name, not John or Mary or I don't know, things like that.
But then it always makes you feel like the other, right?
Yes.
It's like, why can't, you're from Wales, you're born and raised in Wales, you're Welsh, that's it. But people make you feel like, you've got to be from someplace else because you don't look like the typical Welsh person or something. You know?
And I think that's why I was really excited. Do you remember a couple of years ago when like DEI became cool, diversity, equity, inclusion. Everybody was talking about it. But I don't know, in my experience, it's the brown and Black people that are trying to fix the problems, not the perpetrators. And I'm just like, but it's similar to why we're doing this, I think, is because, you gotta, the impetus is not on us to educate. And that's like, that I think is a message. If you want to know something, bloody Google it. Go and do a little teeny bit of reading or watch a TikTok video, but don't ask me to educate you. Do you know what I mean?
Right. But also to be open. Like, I can only imagine this because I'm not all white, but when a white person meets another white person, it's like, "Oh, where are you from?" Blah, blah, blah. But when you meet me, give me that same benefit of the doubt. "Oh, where are you from? What do you like? Whatever." Not just, "Oh, you're Black, you're my Black friend, and as if that has some meaning. It does in a sense, right? Because we were both raised, even though 1,000 miles apart, to that white was the standard. White was right. Right is like the goal. In a way, it wasn't said that way, but you knew that, like, on television when we were kids, like, right, it was mostly there were the few shows and things, but in general, It's only what, the last maybe 15 years, probably, it seems like, where there's a lot more, at least here. I don't know about you, about in the
No,
UK.
it's probably the same, but I've spoken to other people, and I think, whether you're mixed race or, 100% black or 100% brown, I think the common thread is that most of us had a massive period of our growing up lives and even adult lives where we wished we were white. I know I did.
Yeah. Yeah, not in the sense that it's in a societal sense, wishing that you're white, in the sense that I'm tired of people calling me their black friend, or I'm tired of people wanting me to or not expecting me to be able. How many times has someone said to me, "Oh, you're so articulate"? I mean, like, I'm incapable of speaking the language because my skin is brown. I mean, see, you know what I mean? Like, so in that sense, yeah, you want to be like normal.
Well,
Right?
that's what I was gonna say. I think wanting to be white in the sense of having the ability to blend in. I wanted to be the gray person. I wanted to be not noticed for just for just for the color of my skin, basically. But
Yeah.
so I wanted to disappear and just be like everybody else and not be
Yeah.
singled out for anything.
Be able to walk into a room and not have people go like that, which has happened to me.
Is it?
Oh my God, yeah. Oh,
I don't know. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's
oh
not.
yeah. I've had people like, start like that, like, and
Had it in my
that makes
I've
us
had it in my
feel.
job, but not well. I feel sure not because of my color, but just because I'm a woman in a man's world.
Yeah.
I go into a meeting and there's blokes sitting there and they
Yeah.
see them looking behind me and I'm looking behind me and I'm like, who are they looking for? And they're looking for the person that's going to run the meeting. And
Yep.
I'm like, oh, it's me kind of thing. And I
Yep.
sit down. I used to be offended, but now I find it very, very funny. It hasn't happened for a couple of years, but
Yeah.
towards the latter part, I just thought it was hilarious. I sat there and talked about handbags and hair and makeup while they're all like thinking, looking at the door, waiting for it to open for
For
the
the
man
guy.
to take charge. So yeah. But yeah, I think as my confidence grew, I changed my view on it and I stopped looking at it as a slur on me personally, kind of thing.
Well, it's how a lot of them raised. I went through it too in my business when I started. Well, really until sort of much later in my career, I'd be the only woman that I was working for. The executive producers would be guys. My crew, my camera person, my sound, production assistant, whatever. I was the only woman, and I had to run that crew, and it was guys. And these are like tech guys, right? And I'm short. So, that was a double whammy, right? So short, little woman coming in there. Back then I was like really skinny and everything, you're younger, you're skinny. I was this little wisp, and I had to come in there and I had to run that crew if I was going to make a film. And and you have to learn to how to wrangle that, how to work, how to act, how to be in charge. But also, like you said, it's interesting. Once people got to work with me, I had a lot of people guys who wanted to work with me over and over again. Because some people, and this is what I hope, and this is partially what I hope that happens with us with the podcast, is that people will either, on one hand, people who are like us, who are non-mainstream, get to tell their stories, get to talk about their stories, get to talk about their journeys, and people who are of the mainstream get to hear this in a way that they can hear things, and so that sometimes when you meet someone and get to know them, they become the exception for you. But what I mean, in the sense that, oh, you are a person. Oh, we have all these commonalities. Oh, which to me is silly, but to a lot of people it's surprising because of the way society has raised all of us, right? That white, blonde, or whatever is the goal, which can only be achieved through peroxide or birth. But I think that when you don't know someone and you don't know that there are other stories, you just rely on the stereotypes, and that's the mold we want to break. I mean, definitely.
No, exactly. And I think I have been insanely curious from my earliest memory. I was never content with just accepting what was in front of me or who was in front of me. I was always interested in finding out more. I was inquisitive, curious, all of those things, a lot of time to my detriment as well. But I think that is because, in part, because of our history, our backgrounds, our environments, growing up and working as well, to the point where I can be on a video call in a meeting and I can spot the person who is the other. I just know it. I just know it. And I
Yeah.
gravitate to them because I just think, yeah, especially if they're quiet, or I think like, I don't know, I feel like they're not feeling like they're part of the group. I just think, right then, I need to help you become part of the group, because I just think I know what that feels like. And I just don't want anyone ever to feel that, if it can be prevented.
I'm with you. And I mean, also for selfish reasons, for personal reasons, because I know what it's like, but for selfish reasons, like there's so many stories. Why do we want to limit stories? We need all stories to be told, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, it's that assuming, it's relying on stereotypes. And
Yeah.
that's what we want to break by opening up and allowing or becoming a platform for people that are outside of the mainstream to tell their stories, whether it's a fictional story, a true story, or how they got to where they are, the kinds of stories they want to tell. I mean, I think that's really important, and it can be a place for everybody to come to learn, to open up to different cultures, different
Yeah.
lifestyles, different ways of thinking. And you don't have to agree,
No.
right? But
I
it
think it's
doesn't
actually
hurt
healthy.
to be
It's
aware.
actually healthy to it's healthy to have a debate
Yeah.
and not agree on everything, because oh my God, how boring would that be?
Oh my God.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and diverse thinking is just the best. But I just realizing that our stories both feature mixed race protagonists. They're very rich in culture, I think. Mine coming from working class background in a working class town in Wales, yours in the 1930s in the US.
Yep.
When segregation and all the bloody horrible things were rife.
Yep.
And yeah, yet the themes are the
Are
same.
universal.
Yeah, and 100 years apart, and you
Yeah.
know, thousands of miles apart as well. It's bonkers, absolutely bonkers.
It is bonkers, but I mean, I guess that just goes to show you that there are these human stories, and at the same time, there's a lot of good and fun and amazing stuff happening because our stories are finally starting to be told,
Oh, I
right?
know. I can't tell you how happy. I just smile when I see a new documentary or a new film, and I see the cast.
Yes.
How Black Panther raked in the dollars. I
Oh
was
my
like,
God, right?
The
Yeah.
Woman King. I said to my husband, "We got to go to the cinema to watch the Woman King," and he said, "Why?" Because like we could have watched it. And I was like, "No, I have to
Got to
give my
support.
money." Yeah, because I want to be part of the statistics.
Yes,
That shows, I want to be like, I watched the
that's
Woman
right.
King, and it was brilliant. And I'm not just saying that because of my own biases, let's say, but it just was brilliant. There's loads of brilliant stories. There's room for everybody. There's room for every story.
Exactly. There's room for everybody. There's room for every story. The more stories, the better. I mean, honestly. And so, I'm hoping we can do that. And I'm also happy to say, because I've harped on the Black West thing, that's fine. Those stories are finally coming out. They have a whole new. This is by the time people hear this, but Bass Reeves TV show. That's one of the guys.
Yeah.
Characters, historical characters that, of course, I was highlighting in the thing I was developing 20 years ago. And I'm just thrilled. It's not me who brought it to the screen, but I am just thrilled that it's finally those stories are getting out there, because you know what? It makes everything far more interesting and not complex in a good way. So I'm excited about that. I'm really excited about being able to talk to writers and bloggers, people from different things, not just writers or authors, but also journalists and bloggers and
Yeah.
documentarians and stuff about stories, about the stories they're creating or stories that they really just, struck them. So I'm super excited about our new podcast.
because we're going to have company along the way, and it's going to be the conversations. I just want to find out more about everybody else. Yeah, and we'll continue doing what we do by paying it forward.
The more stories, the better. Everyone's welcome. I can't wait. I really can't wait.
Me neither. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into conversations with marginalized writers.
We hope you'll join us as we embrace not fitting the mold.
Instead, help us break it.
Always the Other, conversations about writing from the margins will premiere spring 2024, wherever you get your podcasts. We hope you'll join us.